Well, we're continuing our journey in Genesis this morning, and I hope you enjoyed so far. What we're seeing and encountering in Genesis. Maybe you're seeing some of the familiar patterns of the things that we go through as humans. Just as they went through things, we kind of go through similar structures, similar patterns that have developed in our historic account of Genesis. We've seen relational dynamics at play right from the garden. Crazy things, how people get it wrong as they walk with each other. And the family of Jacob and Esau are prime examples of this. Relational drama, as I would say, lots of drama in this family. And it continued last week as we heard about jealousy, manipulation, deception, and all the complications of family relationships which try to thwart God's promises. And yet God is in control. God is in control of this situation, and we can take heart that God is in control in our own relational drama. I don't know if anyone has relational dramas going on, but most of us have at some point experienced some of that. God's promises that He humbles and disciplines those He loves, and that's a good promise. These historic narratives are showing us that we too go astray. It's easy for us. It shows the reality of our human frailty when it comes to broken and complicated relationships. It also shows that God is at work and that humankind's greatest rescue plan is the truth that God sent His Son Jesus to seek and save the lost, and the hurting and the broken to be redeemed. He came for the poor and the needy. He came for the sick and the downcast. He came for the proud and the arrogant. Jesus came for all humanity in hopes that all would be saved and come to a full revelation of His mercy, His forgiveness extended on the cross of Calvary, and then risen to new life. He came so that we would not only have a new life free from the penalty of sin, but also a sanctifying work by the Holy Spirit, who is at work in us, making us new. Not perfect people, but people whose lives are dependent on Him. It's our heart's cry that we cry out, yes, I believe in you, Jesus, come and make me new. This morning we're journeying with Jacob as he leaves the household of Laban. And so this is a long chapter and a half that we're going to read this morning. There's no way as I'm reading this that I can exegete this whole thing. This is probably like a month of exegeting the scripture, but we're going to get just some theme. The main theme here is that God is in control and that He keeps His promises. And so my hope is that as God calls us to kingdom work, we too realize that He brings things to fruition in our lives, and thus He gets all the fame and He gets all the glory. So if you have the PowerPoint for the next one, we're going to read chapter 30, 25, all the way to the end of chapter 31. So after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you, how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now when may I do something for my own household?" "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages. And my honesty will testify for me in the future, whenever you check on the wages you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen. Agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you have said. That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs, so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they made it in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the street and the dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones went to Jacob. In this way the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came down to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Chapter 31. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned, and he has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to the relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. And he said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I answered, Here I am. And he said, Look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You've done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid, because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle, and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." And so he searched, but could not find the household goods. Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I long wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the 2 of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring your animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me from whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you." Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took stones and piled them in a heap. They ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galeed. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." That is why it was called Galeed. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. So if you mistreat my daughters, or if you take my wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me." Laban also said to Jacob, "Here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He gathered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and then he left and returned home. And now take a deep sigh. Long passage, and lots in there to digest, lots of symbolism in there. But here in this story, I want to take note of a few things. The manipulators, Jacob and Laban, have found their match between the two of them. It's kind of, they've come to a head, the two of them. And Jacob has done his time. He's done his 14 years of service for his wives. So he was treated as a servant. He's not as a kinsman, but he was basically living as a servant of Laban's household for 14 years, paying off a dowry that he was meant to pay. So he came with nothing, remember? Came with nothing, married, or what he hoped was Rachel, but it was Leah, and then had to work for Rachel. And now he's asking Laban to release him from his servanthood. And after 14 years, to be sent home on his way. He demands that Laban give him what is his, and say goodbye, release him. Jacob, spending 14 years paying off his dowry with Leah and Rachel, has paid his time. He could leave if he wanted to. And it's not surprising that he was talking as a servant, because that is what he was. Jacob knows Laban's manipulating ways and how he was deceived before with regard to his wives. And I wonder too, in those moments of his work, 14 years of work, if Jacob realized Laban's deception toward him by switching the wives, did he remember, hey, that was like me and my mom. Like, we did a switcheroo too. And we deceived my dad and my brother for a blessing. And we could even say what goes around has now come around for Jacob. Laban, at the same time, knows the blessing and prosperity. We read here is that Laban understood, hey, whatever has prospered is because of Jacob and the blessing of God. And he doesn't want that to end. Laban is a deceiver, a manipulator, and he's like, I don't want that to end. I like all of this wealth. I like all of this prosperity. And so, how am I going to deceive Jacob again so that he doesn't leave? So Laban throws out a carrot. Here you go, dangle the carrot in front of Jacob. Because Jacob is asking to leave. He didn't say, let me leave with so-and-so. He's leaving with his wives and his children. He didn't ask at the beginning for livestock or anything. He's just like, let me leave, go back to my father's land. But here Laban is like, name your wages. And we've heard that before. Name your wages for Rachel. Name your wages for Leah. And so when he says that, it's kind of like, Jacob's probably going, here we go again. Here we go again. Jacob knows full well that Laban is not a man of his word, nor is he interested in prospering Jacob. He's in it for himself. Laban recognizes that everything he now has come from the Lord blessing Jacob, not his hands, but Jacob's hands. And he wants to continue this good life that he has. So, what shall I give you? Laban asks. And Jacob replies, don't give me anything, but maybe if you can do this for me. Jacob lays out what he would like from Laban. That he would continue to care for Laban's livestock, but would like all the speckled, spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, every spotted or speckled goat that would be born to this time as he cared for the animals, the livestock. That would be his wages. His honesty would be clearly spotted by the sheep in his midst. That's a little joke. So he was really saying, you can look at my livestock anytime and you'll see that I'm not cheating you and I'm not deceiving you. He didn't want any accusation from Laban to come back to him. So how does Laban respond? He agrees to this deal. He's like, whoa, what a great deal. Because my livestock is gonna flourish under Jacob's care, because he's done that before. And the spotted speckled things, like, they're a minority. They hardly, that's the minority part of the breed. So he's thinking he's got it good in this deal. And even he makes it even more improbable by taking all of the speckled, spotted lambs out of the flock, takes a 3 days journey from Jacob, which leaves Jacob with no speckled or spotted lambs to deal with. So he's kind of shooting Jacob in the foot. And how in the world would Jacob respond and proceed? He's like, well, it's going to be nothing. I'm going to be working here for years to build up my flock. It's like everything he has wanted is always sabotaged by Laban, his father-in-law. Instead of being treated as a kinsman, a relative, he's been treated as a slave for years, 14 years. And yet, even here, in all the sabotaging, Jacob prospers. When everything is stacked against you in life, and you feel like there's no solution, don't lose heart. It's a good message here. Don't lose heart. God is faithful, and He is your ever-present help in times of trouble. Even when it looks like you won't proceed at all, turn to God. He is faithful to keep His promises. Jacob didn't coil back. He didn't become despondent. No, he responds knowing God is with him. Humanly, he puts in effort. He works hard. Just as he worked hard for Leah and Rachel. He didn't give up. He's putting together this weird breeding program, weird things that doesn't even make sense. And it would seem that his prosperity is because of this weird breeding program. And yet we read further that in the story, as he speaks to Leah and Rachel, that an angel of God spoke to him in a dream about this breeding, and that it was now time to go back to his homeland. That all of this was God's faithfulness to keep his promise to Jacob. So no obstacle can stop God in this process and his promises to prevail. And eventually, after 6 years of service, Jacob is witnessing the growing tension in this family dynamic. So Laban's sons are like, Dad, Jacob is stealing everything. Like, he's taking all of your wealth. And he is growing strong and powerful and prosperous. And we are being left with nothing because everything is turning spotted and speckled. So Jacob is growing prosperous. And it wasn't that Jacob had taken all of the wealth or the livestock, as much as it was that Jacob had just prospered greatly. So there was still livestock growing for Laban, but it was the Laban's sons who were looking envious and going, they have way more than we do. Dad, we're going to lose out. And so envy and greed came into the mix here and began filtering through Laban's mind, his son's mind, and it begins to cause a deep rift between these two households. And Laban is not willing to release Jacob, because in doing so, he's releasing his ability to cheat and manipulate, change the course of direction for Jacob. And Jacob knows this, he's hearing this, and he flees. Rightly so, God says, leave. So he leaves. So Jacob talks to his wives, and they agree that their father has no intention of keeping his word, treating any of them with kindness, and they fled with all they had, and with a little extra. Rachel was like, I'm going to steal my dad's gods. And there's many reasons why she stole these gods. Some scholars, most of them, believe that these gods represented the right to inheritance. And so really Rachel maybe could be saying, I'm going to steal these gods because just in case this is my right to my dad's inheritance. If he's got anything left, it belongs to me. And so most scholars think that is the reason why she stole them. And so off they go. She hides them. But whatever the motive in that is, that it's one of the reasons that Laban now runs after Jacob and his family. Genesis 31:22-55 tells the interaction with Laban and Jacob and their final separation. What is notable here in these verses is the confrontation between these two men. And Jacob finally speaks his mind and his truth to Laban. He's confronting his father-in-law with the truth of how he diligently worked at prospering his father-in-law and being above reproach. He also shares how he was treated and cheated by Laban, and how the God of his father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had been with him all of those years. Because if they had not been, surely Laban would have sent him away empty-handed. But that was not God's promise. God's promise was that he would leave prosperous. God had seen Jacob's hardship, the toil of his hands, and God rebuked Laban, intent to do harm to Jacob. God is keeping his promise to Jacob, what he made in Genesis 28:13-15, which reads, I am the Lord, the God of your father, Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land in which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. And so this is the fulfillment of what God said in chapter 28 to Jacob in the land of Bethel. So even though it's now 20 years later, God is shown as the faithful one, the one who was in control of Jacob's prosperity and to fulfill what he had promised to Jacob. Even though it could well have been said that Jacob's master plan of breeding was the result of all the prosperity, it was God who intervened. It was the God who intervened genetically and brought about speckled and spotted sheep and goats. It was God who allowed the animals to come out spotted, so that God would get all the glory and the praise. So finally, Laban and Jacob part. Here in this telling, even though Laban disagrees, so Laban is disagreeing right again as they interact, still believing that everything Jacob has is still his wives, his daughters, his livestock. But he knows that he's been warned by God not to lay a hand on Jacob. And so he relents and gives up, waving the white flag of surrender. Laban needs one more source of reassurance, the building of the heap, the building of the pillar. He suggests that they form a covenant so that neither of them do each other harm, which could well be Laban's need to know that the now prosperous Jacob who he treated poorly, will not do any harm to him. So he wouldn't return. So these pillars and heaps were set up as a boundary line, saying, if we cross over, we can do each other harm. So he basically built a pillar. The heap meant that if Jacob were to cross over back into the land of Laban actually could do away with Jacob, kill him, because he's now crossed into his territory. That was the notion of the Mizpah, that word. And vice versa. So it was kind of like Laban putting an added thing and saying, okay, Jacob, you're not allowed to come back and kill me or take everything else from me. So they build this heap of stones and sacrifice upon the altar. They share a meal. And finally, Laban releases Jacob and his daughters and all that Jacob had accumulated by the grace of God. And this is the last we hear of Laban. That's it. Laban's no longer written about. And we can learn a valuable lesson from his life. We can learn the lesson that Laban really represents worldly thinking. The worldly thinking of grasping a hold of what the world offers. Prosperity, wealth, deceiving and manipulating, or putting all of our trust in the world. His life was full of envy and greed. And rather than seeking to follow what he witnessed in Jacob's life of trusting God, working hard, he resented that fact that God blessed Jacob. And Laban ends up empty-handed. This can happen to us in subtle ways when we look at our lives and the lives of others who may prosper, and we may feel we're missing out. I know when I watch HGTV, sometimes I feel like I'm missing out on a brand new kitchen. That's a nice kitchen. I'm missing out. It's the fear of missing out. We can be filled with envy and covetousness and wish that we had more than what we have right now. Being content in the everyday where God has us planted and doing his kingdom work in the things that he's called us to do. As Jacob leaves, he knows full well that he's going back to the place that God promised blessing. He's going back to Bethel. God spoke to him, blessings, but he's also moving back toward somebody he ran away from. So he's got to face somebody. He's got to face his brother Esau, and that's a scary notion. And we're going to hear about that in the messages coming up. But that must have been a fearful thing for him he fled in fear, and now he's going back. But I'm wondering if all of the things that he encountered with Laban has been doing something in his heart, preparing him to now one day face his brother and make amends. God is not finished. He keeps his promises right to the very end. In this place of Jacob waiting, working, and serving, we see the spiritual lesson for us that God is working and building up his kingdom and fulfilling his promise, not in Jacob's timing, but in his own. God is reminding Jacob and us that he is in control. And as God built up his kingdom, he is in fact making a way for the coming Messiah. So this was all for the coming of the Messiah, Jesus. And here in this place, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross becomes our liberation from sin, where we encounter the grace and mercy of God to walk as once forgiven and set free. So now in our waiting, anyone waiting? We're all waiting. We're all waiting for the fulfillment of the prophecy that Jesus is coming back, that he's returning, that he will one day wipe everything away, wipe away all tears, all suffering, all of the things of the world that tries to seek to set up in our lives, in our hearts. We are waiting for Jesus' return. And in this place, we're called to work for his kingdom, not in our own strength, but in the strength of the power of the Holy Spirit. And we're serving one another. We're serving our communities. God is building up his kingdom right now at Trinity Baptist, in our neighborhoods, our communities, here in this present moment where we partner with God in making disciples of all nations, making the most of every opportunity, walking in the fruit of the Spirit, because we know that there will one day come a day where every knee will bow and tongue confess that Jesus is Lord. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 says, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God." Jesus will fulfill his promise that he comes again to destroy all the work of the enemy of deception and manipulation, and every sin of every sort, which wants to deceive and manipulate us. So there is a conclusion to every story, which for us is just the beginning. So our earthly life will conclude, but our eternal life continues on. Our spiritual life continues on, and it's just the beginning of the many eternal blessings that await us as believers. So if this morning you find yourself waiting and wondering, is God actually at work? I've been waiting a long time for him to fulfill his promises for me. Boy, it's been a long time. I've been praying for certain things. He's even said things to me, and I'm waiting. And you become weary in the waiting. If you realize that you need Jesus rather than relying on this broken and empty world, which in truth has nothing to offer you eternally. Nothing in this world offers us eternal blessings. If you know that you are struggling with envy, or your faith has diminished because you don't see God at work, we'd love to pray with you after the blessing. So can we stand together? One of the songs that we sang this morning was "My worth is not in what I own," and I think that's a good reminder for us that our worth is not in what I own. It's not in what I have. It's not in the strength of my flesh and bones, but it's in the costly wounds of the love of the cross. Our life is found at the cross of Jesus and what he did for us. It's not in our skill or our name and who we are, but it's in the blood of Christ that flowed at the cross. So as we stand to receive the Aaronic blessing, be reminded that when you enjoy health and wholeness, and you experience blessings of many kinds, and when you encounter God's grace given to you, and when you succeed in what you put your hands to, do not forget that God is the source of all of those things. It's all because of the Lord. Remember that no good gift is possible without the Lord God Almighty, who loves you with an extravagant love. And so may the Lord bless you and keep you, and the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you, and the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace today.